Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gills, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure? It's cultist coffee. What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? I am doing pretty good today. Yesterday, I didn't do the Crafter's Corner last night because I got working writing yesterday. And even though I didn't get as much written as I wanted to, I was kind of in the zone and I was getting back into the swing of trying to write fiction and work on the scripts and things like that. So I just kind of stayed with it. I've hit some snags over or hit some walls over there, but I'll break through those. But it was good to just kind of be doing that. And that got me in the mood to writing for again this morning. I was up early this morning and I worked for 3 hours this morning already on the Tales of Rebavania World Primer. Started at the very beginning and did an edit pass from the very beginning all the way down to the last chapter. So I still got to go through the last chapter. We'll talk about the last chapter, the bestiary, on Wednesday. We take a look at different stats for 5e for mice and weasels and raccoons and things like that. So we'll go over those stats on Wednesday, and then I'm going to make one more pass through the entire document, and then I'm going to go to layout with it. So I'm very excited about that. Good morning. Good morning, Brent. Let's see who we got here. Brent is here. Good morning, channel member. James, good morning. Also, Mike, good morning. Channel Zero the Blade, good morning. Good morning, Sable Phoenix and Chase. Oh, going to the chiropractor? I hope that goes well for you. Don't know anything about Cortex yet. Well, yes, this will be a good one because the Cortex right here, it's not one that people talk about all that often, but I wanted to go back to it. We've looked at it briefly on the grind, on a very early morning grind. But it's interesting, I think, because it's in the same family of games that we've been looking at. It's in the way I'm categorizing games, it's in the same family as GURPS, Fate, and Savage Worlds, but it uses a different kind of mechanic here, but it's not one that you see a lot. I think their strategy, as far as I understand it, was to create this, and this is like a toolkit. So this is like a toolkit RPG book, their core book, from which you can take all of the different stuff. So in that case, it's like GURP. So this is like the core toolkit book for Cortex, which you can then take and build out other worlds and RPGs. Most notably, to me, was this, the Dragon Prince role-playing game. I was a fan of the Dragon Prince TV show, and I want to look at this again. I looked at this not on the morning grinds. I looked at this on the channel before I was doing anything live. So there are videos of me when I go through this. And then, because people told me, well, you should check out Cortex, and I think it's because it's in the same family. Because they told me I should check out Savage Worlds too. And they're right. Okay, so yes, why do I like that one? It's because it's in the same kind of family of games that I like. And then when I was getting into Tales of Zadia here, this one was also kind of in the same genre, the same family. And then this is its abstracted toolkit. So we're going to take a look at the abstracted toolkit. I do want to go back and look at this too, because Dragon Prince is a bit of an inspiration for Rabavania. So some things that's doing in here might be good when it comes to a dedicated Rabavania RPG. So I'm interested. Hey, Anon. Good morning, Anon. Warren says, what is this Cultist movie? The Cultists is my web show about modern-day cultists who are just trying to, modern-day Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. We actually had a live watch party for it on the Burnett Network. That was Saturday. Had a great time. Burnett, so yes, the series is available on YouTube. It's available on my channel. If you go and take a look here, I'll bring this up. I just searched for the Cultists. All of those, the Cultists episode, season 1, episode 1. They're 2 seasons online. Each episode's about 6 minutes long, so a whole season's only an hour long. The Cultist season 1 trailer. Here's The Trouble with Rob. The Cultist season 2, episode 1. That's all that's what all the clips are from the start of this show. So that's what the Cultist is about. We're going to try to promote it some more. When the time is right. Try to do some more with it. I think it deserves it. And of course, RM's going to host this watch party of season 2 in about 2 weeks. If you didn't watch season 1 watch party, that was so much fun. Look up the Burnett Work or Positive Fandom for the Cultist watch party. Let's see what else is going on. Let's start off by here's the Ravenkeep Discord server. If you are here but you're not yet a part of the Discord server, that is the best way to keep knowledgeable on what's going on. If I'm going live on some other time other than 9 o'clock a.m. on the morning grind, I do put out a call, an at everyone about 15 minutes before it goes live, so you know when something is going live and what's going on, especially if I'm going to be on somebody else's channel, like I was on Saturday. So the Discord server is the best way to keep in touch with that. I'm going to work with the email list some more. I realized that my email list, when I was sending out emails, I was trying to send out some emails about what we were doing, and I realized that some of them are going out late. It's not letting me send, I guess, the entire amount, and I got to hook up a different type of, was it SMTP server or something like that? I've got to work on that. So I'm going to work on getting the email going, and then I'll put that out to so you can join the email list, because I've got other people who are on the email list. I'm going to try to get the email people on the Discord server. I need to put out that list again because the email people need to be on the Discord server. Hey, Gordon. Gordon says, hi, everyone. Been watching the channel's YouTube for quite a while, but this is the first time I've been able to join the stream live. Love the content. Oh, thank you, Gordon. So here's to you, actually, Gordon. We'll toast to you since it's your first time in the chat. And Mike is right. It is time to just sip and breathe in general. So let's do that right now. Let's breathe. 2 deep breaths. Deep inhales, complete exhales, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage this morning. Here we go. There we go. Feeling much better. So if you, I was going to say, so join the Raven Keep Discord server, but then also planning this week to send out the surveys on the Goodnight Sword Kickstarter. Goodnight Sword is my medieval fantasy story, which is obviously a takeoff of Goodnight Moon, a world of gallantry, chivalry, and rabbits based on the classic story Goodnight Moon. The Kickstarter, this is very important because the Kickstarter, this was the first book that was published in one of the worlds that we're developing here. So this is for the youngest audience. The Kickstarter just finished last week. So if you want to get it, though, I was immediately asked, as soon as the Kickstarter ends, this is the way Kickstarters always go, because as soon as the Kickstarter ends, I was immediately asked by people, like within minutes, oh my God, I was trying to get here to pledge and I just missed the pledge. Well, if you click on that late pledge, request late pledge, you'll be taken to a form to request a late pledge. I'm going to send out the surveys to get people's addresses. I plan on that later this week because I believe that even though Kickstarter hasn't transferred the money yet, it should be have had enough time for everybody to make sure that you've managed your pledge. If somebody's like their card didn't go through or something like that, to make sure that everybody's pledge has been finalized. First, Kickstarter finalizes the pledges, then it will send all the money. Because there's always some people who need to update a card because it's like an old card on Kickstarter or something like that. So if you want a late pledge, when I send out the surveys, I will send you an invoice to make a late pledge. I'm not going through a pledge manager because we're getting this done. This is low drama. This is fast. I'm going to be sending out the books basically as soon as the money hits the account from the Kickstarter campaign. And if you want to check it out more, hit that link, and then you can check out the animated audiobook that's on there. We did an animated audiobook, and I'm looking forward to doing more animated audiobooks for the Tales of Rabavania. I was thinking about that today as I was finishing editing, especially that intro to Tales of Rabavania. That needs a good audiobook as well. So I'm not going through a pledge manager, but I will send an invoice this week. If you did miss it and you're like, oh, I got to get on it, I'll be happy to send you an invoice, and then yours will go out with everybody else's rewards. So that's going on. Good morning, Stray. Good morning, Stray. Anon says, going door to door, spreading the good work of Father Dagon. Works for the other father-based religions. Hey, why not? I'm sure Rob would like that. And then also, all right, so let's get to our role-playing side of stuff. Here was a comment that we've got from Rhino Watcher, and Rhino Watcher is a friend here. And we can see what we think about this as far as our RPG design goes. So Rhino Watcher, I noticed, posted this, and I haven't been able to respond yet, so I just decided, well, let's talk about this question right here. So this was a comment posted on the RPG design problem solved. So this was just from 2 days ago. So Rhino Watcher says, do I have this up? Okay, so Rhino Watcher says, this kind of stuff, let's see. Here we go. Rhino Watcher says, I feel the Call of Cthulhu system accomplishes what you want. And we did take a look at basic role-playing, which is the abstract system from Call of Cthulhu, although it came from before Call of Cthulhu. Although we liked Call of Cthulhu, the latest edition of Call of Cthulhu, the rules better than what was in basic role-playing. But anyway, Rhino says, I feel the Call of Cthulhu system accomplishes what you want, i.e. a character with 70% chance of success will succeed 70% of the time. You are rolling a D100, and it is random, but 70% of those times it is a success, and 30% of those times it is a failure. What do we think about that? A character with a 70% chance of success will succeed 70% of the time. And I'm no stranger to D100 systems. I don't mind D100 systems because My first introduction to role-playing was MERP, actually, and it's a D100 system. So also it seems kind of natural to do D100. I thought about doing D100 when I was initially thinking about what kind of system I wanted to design. You're rolling a D100, and that is random. So if you're rolling, a 100-sided die or percentile dice, every number has got a 1% chance of showing up, but that's what allows it to be able to do percentages like this. And it is random, but 70% of those times it's success, and 30% of these times it is a failure. Well, I think this seems to be the same argument that was used. We saw in another comment where we're saying, well, basically, don't you just need to decrease the DCs? Because a lot of us have come to the conclusion that maybe 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons thinks that it is actually too hard to do things. And we even talked about why is it that Dungeons and Dragons thinks that an easy task should be a 50-50 split or something like that, basically a coin flip. So can't you just solve that if you just lower all the DCs? And then you have random dice. You have a random dice throw, but you're looking at the percentage chance. Well, there are a couple of things that I would say there. Because yes, you could do that. Because some people said, I believe this was another commenter that said, it's the rate of success or failure that people are feeling. It's not the randomness, according to that line of thought. It's not the randomness that they're feeling. They're feeling the actual success or failure. And I agree with that. They are feeling the actual success or failure. Is it true that if you have a 70%, well, first of all, we have the psychological aspect, which I talked about with Jeff Engelstein a lot. So that if you have 70%, if a 70% chance of success on your character sheet, 70% chance of the success, and you fail 30% of the time, how do you feel? So there's a human psychology aspect of this. Is that right? If you see 70% chance of success on your character sheet and you fail, how do you feel? Especially if you have a 70% chance of success on your character sheet and you fail twice. You fail twice in a row. How do you feel? You feel like you have less than a 70% chance. And I think it was Mark Tassin who was talking about it. Seems like that if you say this is a fair fight, there's a 50% chance of you winning and a 50% chance of them winning or landing a hit or whatever. We don't feel like it's fair. If it's 50-50, we don't feel like it's fair. That humans human psychology tends to say, so Mark was saying from some source, that 60-40 feels fair to us. If we have a 60% chance of winning and you got a 40% chance of winning, that feels fair to me. Of course, it feels stacked against you. I was also reminded about that exercise that I would do when talking about nuclear strategy and geopolitics. When you've got two people and you tell them to put their hand together, you tell two people and you bring them up to the front of the classroom and you say, all right, we're going to do a demonstration about like nuclear theory here and nuclear weapons theory or nuclear strategy. And you're going to be putting your hands together, but each of you is going to have a secret instruction about how hard to push and what to do during this contest. And so then you secretly tell each player actually the exact same thing. You tell the other player to push on the other person's palm with exactly the same amount of force that they are pushing on your palm. No more and no less. Your goal is to exactly match that person's strength, their force of push. And so both people have that information secretly, and then they put their palms up against one another, and then you tell them to start. And then what inevitably happens? What inevitably happens is they start pushing against each other harder and harder and harder, and they perceive that the other person's instructions were to exceed the strength at which they were pushing, whereas actually they both had instructions just to push equally as hard. So there is something about our perception there that doesn't completely square with having a 70% chance sitting there on your character sheet, I feel like. And a character with a 70% chance of success will succeed 70% of the time. Is that true? Can you say that? If you're sitting there with a 70% chance of success on your character sheet, can you say that you're going to succeed 70% of the time? You're rolling this one D100. Let's assume that's a perfectly fair D100 roll. And 70% of the times you roll, it's a success, and 30% of the times that you roll, it's a failure. we would expect that average over many, many rolls, right? If I tell you to please roll that 1,000 times, then you would expect that roughly 70% of those it'll be a success and 30% of those rolls that you are a failure. But you can have a 70% chance of success and roll a failure. And then when you roll again, these are independent rolls. The dice don't remember what happened last time, so you can fail again. Can you fail a third time in a row? Absolutely. So if you fail 3 times in a row, it would be the gambler's fallacy to think, oh, okay, well, now the next 7 times I make this roll, I should succeed, because the rolls are independent. So I guess I'm objecting to the idea that, hey, if there's a 70% chance on your sheet, then that means during the game, 70% of the time you will succeed, because you might fail every single time you make that roll. You could fail every single time you make that roll. Likewise, you could succeed every time you make that roll. You could have, how many times you're going to make this roll? You might make it 10 or 12 during the game. You could fail every time. You could succeed every time. We were talking about the sessions where you sit down. It feels like you roll nothing but 1s to 5s, and you mess up on everything that you do, even the easy stuff. So I was thinking that it does seem like a lot of role-playing games, and this is not exactly this point here, but it seems like a lot of role-playing games want the less advanced characters, the less experienced characters, to be more random. That, okay, less experience means greater randomization. And then the more experience you get, the less random you'll get, because your modifiers will be higher. But that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the less experienced characters to be less capable, but still reliable. Reliable in what they can do. They're less capable, but they're still reliable in what they can do. I think that's better. I think that's better. Now, everybody's got different play styles, but if you're less capable because you're low level, but you're not more random. You're still knowledgeable and you still have reliable abilities, even though they're not as capable as a higher level character. Anon says, depending on what percentage chance there is of the GM calling for a roll in the first place. Zero the Blade says, success rate is what companies like to keep around 50%. The moment it passes 60, then it's unbalanced. Success rate is what companies, you're talking about RPG like design companies, want to keep around 50%. For the moment it passes 60, then it's unbalanced. Psychologically, failure doesn't seem so bad in Call of Cthulhu because it's expected to a degree. Like, things are bad in Call of Cthulhu, comically, so failure ends up being an expected part of play. Maybe this is what we need in games regarding failure. No idea how to even begin doing this. By mitigating expectations. Well, different game styles are going to have different expectations. We're not talking about right or wrong. Some people will definitely want a very random experience, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that's not the design philosophy that I'm currently using. Can you buffer failure? Maybe add a point of positive modifier for every failure until a success is rolled. What was the momentum or something like that? That some of the 2D20 system or something was used, and so I mean, I think you could. If you fail, then you get some type of bonus that's going to make it less likely that you're going to fail next time. There was, or momentum, that when you roll success, you got, when you rolled failure, your whole team got momentum points that you could use to not fail last time. Sable Phoenix was talking about something like, well, if you fail this time, then take advantage on the roll next time. Zero the Blade series theory says, as a Fire Emblem fan, I can tell to chances. I can tell the chances mean nothing because you can miss with a 99% to hit, or die to the enemy's 1% crit. Gordon says, I watched a friend lose $3,000 in about 2 minutes at a roulette wheel in Vegas due to this exact thinking. Right. I don't want to design a game around the gambler's fallacy. That's what I'm trying to not do. There are reasons. This is a fantastic comment. I really like this comment. There are other reasons. These comments like this encourage conversation and discussion here, and that's the best kind of comment. There are other reasons to encourage players to try to roll. Again, COC makes this the only way to increase skill. And I do like that. I'm going to see if I can try to integrate that into this game, into Fated Edge, because I do like that. I like using skills, and when you use skills, you get to increase them. I do like that. So you can try something you're not the best in because it's how you're going to improve the skill. And likewise, if you want to increase it at all, you're going to have to try using it, even though you're bad at it. The issue with decreasing randomness, Rhino Watcher says, is that it discourages people from trying and makes them feel railroaded. Well, I think those are two different things. It discourages people from trying. Yes. Okay. So increasing randomness, some people will like those games because this is the example we use all the time. And maybe we're now overusing it, but it goes right here. Hey, I'm a first level character. I have a short bow. That's the dragon over there. Can I kill it? What is the game master's response supposed to be? It depends entirely on the type of field they are going for. As we were talking about yesterday, the game master would be like, no, you're a first level character. You have a tiny little short bow. Maybe you're just a little hobbit. You are not going to shoot the bow and kill the dragon. And the player says, no, please just let me try. I just want to try. Can't I? It might be the case that I shoot the bow. It goes right into the dragon's eye, through the eye and into his brain and kills it. There's a chance, right? There's a chance that happens. Well, so if you're decreasing randomness, you're going to go, no, that's not going to happen. You can't even roll for that. You've got to come up with a different way to kill the dragon. But if you do want to encourage people to try, then you would say, yeah, that's what open-ended rolls, the D100 open-ended rolls are often about. Yeah, if you roll a 100, that's a crit hit, and it's open-ended like in MERP or Rollmaster, and then you roll another 100, another 100, it could happen, and then all of a sudden you've inflicted this extreme crit upon this dragon, not because of any major choices you made as a player or reasoning of the game world. It just happens that you happen to be able to roll dice very well in this particular moment. So, yes. So, in other styles of play, you would want to discourage or not allow that player to make that roll, because if they want to kill the dragon, they're going to have to come up with a better plan. They're actually going to have to come up with a better plan. In Fate, talk about adding on new advantages, creating advantages for yourself, stacking the odds in your favor, and then fighting the dragon. So the death of the dragon would come about because of better player choices and not just because we wanted to encourage somebody to take a random roll. The issue with decreasing randomness is that but the opposite side of that, the issue with decreasing randomness is that it discourages people from trying. Increasing randomness can also discourage people from trying, especially because those like open-ended rolls that can be really good with high criticals the same type of games often have critical failures and fumbles. So you can discourage players from trying because it's random. One thing you could do, I suppose, in a game then is say, we're going to have critical successes, but we're just not going to have critical failures. So yes, there's a chance you want to take a shot at this dragon with this short bow. Yes, there's a chance that arrow will go right into his eye, right into his brain and kill it. But there's also a chance you're going to fumble your bow while you try to make that shot, and you're accidentally going to shoot yourself through the brain. You're going to shoot yourself through the kidney or something like that. You're going to fumble the bow, or you're going to shoot your neighbor. You're going to shoot that guy, the other hero sitting at the table, right through the throat. So if you increase randomness on that other end, then you're also discouraging people from trying. I've seen people play like, I try not to touch the dice, because the dice, we think it's fun. It often can seem like it's fun when you're designing a game. Look at all of these amazing critical fumbles and terrible things that could happen to you if you roll really low with a really random. Yeah, man, look, I rolled really low. I happened to roll really low. And like we used the example, I was King Arthur. I was drawing Excalibur. I rolled really, really low because it was highly random and I killed myself. So you can definitely use randomness. Randomness can absolutely discourage people from trying. It can if it's used wrong. So it's not necessarily one way or the other. It can go both ways. Like I said, one thing you would do is just not have critical fumbles and only have critical successes. Then you wouldn't discourage people from trying as much with randomness, and makes them feel railroaded. I don't know. If you're playing Amber, did you feel railroaded? I suppose the extreme end there would be that, well, no, if we just eliminate randomness from the game, does that mean you're being railroaded? It seemed like Amber was going to be difficult to play to me, but it did seem like I think that Sable Phoenix's idea of it being a theater of the mind LARP was right. I wasn't necessarily feeling that just because we eliminated random, you were being railroaded. That doesn't necessarily follow to me. You can certainly try is the correct reply. You can certainly try communicates the freedom to the player, the omen of terrible consequences should they fail. Odds of hitting the dragon in the minute. Odds of him trying to barbecue you for the effort high. Yes. Anand says you can, in fact, you can replace difficulty numbers for single rolls by simply asking for more of them. You can replace difficulty numbers for single rolls by simply asking for more rolls. Like in the war games where you're rolling a big fistful of D6s. And then, yes, there are also meta mechanics. Luck abilities, bennies, like in Savage Worlds, fate points, hero dice, in the 5th edition DMG. You can do things as a player if you roll for a fail. And we got to talk about the meta mechanics as well, because I was trying to design Fated Edge without them, but we may end up having it. I hadn't decided yet. There are reasons to not have meta mechanics, and I think I solved some of the issues that with meta mechanics that I don't really think should require meta mechanics, but there may still be some type of meta mechanic in there. We're still thinking about that. And then also there's partial success. And we've talked about adjudicating partial success quite a bit here on the channel. And we've come up with reasons to like partial success, and we've come up with reasons to not like partial success. And particularly free-form adjudication of partial success, we've said, can be difficult and slow down a game. So there may be mechanical adjudications of partial success. In the 5e DMG, if you get within 5 of the DC, you get a partial with the optional partial success rules. And that's probably, my guess is that's probably rather freeform. I was looking for that in the DMG. I saw some other things in the DMG about success at a cost, but I didn't find the partial success. So anyway, it's very interesting. So that's a great comment, but that would be my response there. I think we've been over some of that before, but it hits all of those points again. All right, let's take a look at Cortex. The Forged one says, do you think it's better from a psychological perspective to hide or abstract the percent chance of success? In other words, D100 where you see the percentage versus a game like D&D where you do not see the percentage? It seemed from the discussion with Jeff Engelstein, it seemed like you would hide it, and you would have because of from the psychological perspective, it seems like you would hide it, and you would just say easy, hard, or very hard, or something like that, because our perception. He was saying that our perception of percentages don't line up with what actually happens in the game. So if you don't see them, then you're probably not having that psychological hurdle. But on the other hand, I don't necessarily think having percentages is bad. Hey, Nose. Welcome. All right, let me bring up. I've got the Cortex physical book right here, and also the Tales of Zadia physical book. But let's just bring up the PDF. Where is it? Well, I'll find it again. Okay, here it is. Well, should be. Hang on a moment. There. Okay. Has anyone tried this one? We're going to be doing dice pools in this one. Has anyone ever played this or played a game based on it? See, the strategy of the company of this Cortex, this is not an open system. It seems like they designed the Cortex system, and then their business strategy was deliberately to go and get a bunch of different IPs and use the Cortex system to create RPGs for different IPs, such as the Dragon Prince. And He-Man was supposed to be one of them, but I think when the company was sold, that project got put on hiatus. I would have liked to have seen a He-Man RPG. But that seems to be their strategy here. So, like I said, I think this is in the family of games like GURPS, Savage Worlds, and Fate. So it's got some of the same structure, and this book is definitely a toolkit for creating a RPG in a game world. So it's got all of your different stuff in here to use as a toolkit. You know, it became more concretized in, for instance, the Tales of Zadia. But let's see what this is. This is also active defense. This is active attack and active defense or active resistance of all kinds. So let's see. Multi-genre, modular, session-centered role-playing game. Because this is the toolkit that was supposed to be used to build out a whole bunch of different RPGs and a bunch of different worlds and IPs. We've got to look at Blades in the Dark. That one comes up quite a bit. Please do like and subscribe. Please do. Thank you, Stray. So there was part, let's see, so the core of Cortex. Okay, so here it is. Read this first, the Cortex primer. Here's what we're doing here. Here's the core of Cortex stripped down to the basics. Everyone writes down their character's name and one central thing they're good at doing. This is their trait. So it's similar to Fate in the way that, okay, we don't have aspects. They're calling it traits here. But you write down your character's name, and for instance, if you've got a trait that says you're a seasoned journalist, okay, then each player makes decisions for their character. What would Jane do? If a player wants their character to do something that the character's trait would help them do, they roll 666. My experience is that's three six-sided dice. My experience as a journalist will help me gather information on this subject. Okay, if their trait doesn't have anything to do with the thing they are trying to do, now we're about to get much more sophisticated by having a bunch of different traits, but this is assuming you have one trait. If their trait doesn't have anything to do with the thing they want to do, they roll 2 6s. My experience as a journalist is of no help helping me win this fist fight. Each character starts with 1 plot point, so there's also PP. I often say PowerPoint, but it's not PowerPoint, it's plot point. That's our meta currency, like a fate point. Okay. In this handbook, dice are represented by the symbols below. So we're using D4, D6, D8, D10, and D12. So a super basic Cortex Prime character, Jane. Basic journalist, 1 PowerPoint. Oh, seasoned journalist, 3. If you want to do something, and there's something that might get in your way, such as the environment, another character, or time, you make a test. Sometimes someone else picks up the dice to establish the difficulty number you must beat to succeed. For easy opposition, roll 6, D6. For challenging opposition, roll 2d6. For hard opposition, it's 3d6 or more. Then you either roll the default 2d6 or the 3d6 if your trait is applicable. If you roll 1 on a die, that die is called a hitch and doesn't count. Well, going up here, this means that even for something like static, what we typically consider static opposition, the game master still rolls for the opposition to determine its difficulty value. Typically, we've been saying, should we have active opposition or not? We've tended to say, well, sometimes you do have passive opposition. Hey, I've got to climb over that wall. Well, the wall isn't something that's actively stopping you from climbing it, so the wall probably has a static target number that you've got to roll equal to or over. Okay, and if you do, then you get over the wall. That's a pretty standard RPG mechanic. But if you're trying to get through that door, but there's a thug stopping you, who's a muscly thug who's in the way, who stopped blocking you. Well, now I'm trying to get past the thug, And so now I might need to roll. I'm going to be rolling against the thug. And either, depending on the game system, the thug is going to present a static number again, like a resistance, or that thug is going to make a roll against me and we're going to compare our numbers. But, and we talked about advantages and disadvantages of that quite a bit. But in Cortex, you always roll. The game master is always going to roll to determine difficulty. So the game master determines easy, challenging, or hard, and then rolls the dice to find out. So that wall, so the wall to climb might always be challenging. So the wall is just challenging. So you still have to determine challenging. This is a weird part of the system, I think, because it does require you to do two things. The game master still has to determine a difficulty. The wall is challenging. Okay, but that alone doesn't give me a number to succeed on climbing that wall. The game master have to roll the dice, those 2d6, and then determine the difficulty of rolling the wall, climbing the wall. Anon says, I suspect the lead designer would love an open license Cortex, but it just wasn't an option. And sadly, the rights keep hopping from company to company. Yes, so probably. But yeah, it's not an open system, unfortunately. It was developed internally, closed, to, I think, develop other RPGs based on licenses they acquire. And now, yeah, it keeps hopping around from company to company now. So it's in a state of limbo, and some projects have been canceled. Okay, then you either roll the default, so then you roll against the opposition. If you roll a 1 on a die, that die is called a hitch and doesn't count. When you roll a hitch, the GM can give you a PowerPoint. You can spend a PowerPoint later on to add a D6 to your roll if you can describe something cool that helps you out. Total up your dice, excluding any hitches. If you have more than 2 dice, add only the 2 best die together. So that's going to be an important part of this because you're going to be developing a dice pool. It's going to be much more sophisticated than this later on. But even though you might be rolling a fistful of dice, you're only going to add together the 2 best dice. So that's going to allow a lot more things to be influential, which I like about this. It's going to allow a lot more things to be potentially influential on your success on a task, but you aren't like scaling all of your dice rolls up to infinity as you continue to add more and more dice to your pool. You can add more and more dice to your pool of different sizes based on different characteristics you have, but then you're always going to take the 2 best. Your opposition does the same. If you beat your opposition's total, you succeed. If you get equal to or less, you fail. Talk about what happened instead. So equal to does not beat. You've got to exceed your opposition. That's basically what we're doing, except for we're going to get more sophisticated because we're going to have a lot more traits and they're going to be rated by different dice. Good morning, Andrew. And PH. So here are some different examples. So the informant. Jane needs to talk to a source inside a members-only bikers bar. The GM decides that it should be more challenging to get past the bouncer and rolls 2d6. The GM rolls a 3 and a 4. Jane's player tries to convince the GM that her journalistic background would make her a smooth talker. The GM disagrees that her trait would apply here, so they restrict the player to only rolling 2d6. Player rolls a 1 and a 5, so that 1 is a hitch. Jane's total at 5, only has a total of 5, does not beat the GM, but she picks up a plot point for rolling a 1, a hitch. The bouncer shoves Jane into the mud. The source comes out and hands her his card. She'll get the info later, but will she hit her deadline? Okay, so what else? Every Cortex Prime game, even our stripped-down basic rules light version, incorporates traits. A trait, when you get right down to it, is a descriptive label with a die rating attached. Nearly everything on your character file is a trait. For the most part, the rating is a type of die, D4 through D12, but it could be a multiple of dice, like 2D8, or 2 die types together, like D4 plus D12. Cortex Prime traits are almost universally like this trait name and then a die icon. The game breaks traits down into sets, such as attributes, roles, value, and so on. So if you're building your own Cortex Prime game, you pick trait sets that most suit your settings or world. So, for instance, here, if you've got attributes, you could have attributes, roles, values, etc. And then what you would do is you would pick a die that would apply to the task that you're doing from each group of traits, each set. So that's what was going on in Tales of Zadia over here. Let me see if I can find a character sheet over here with Tales of Zadia. Okay. So, for instance, all of the characters in the Dragon Prince Tales of Zadia RPG have a set of attributes and a set of values. So their attributes are agility, awareness, influence, intellect, spirit, and strength. So it kind of goes along with the theme of the show. And each one of those, agility, awareness, influence, intellect, spirit, and strength, are rated as either D4, D6, D8, D10, or D12. But then also you have a set of values, which are a separate set. So you got attributes, another set of values, which are devotion, glory, justice, liberty, mastery, and truth. Devotion, glory, justice, liberty, mastery, and truth. And all of those are rated from D4 to D12. So if you're trying to accomplish a task, pick the attribute for one die that is most applies to that task, and then also pick a value that applies to this particular task. And those would be the dice you roll. And then you can also add specialties that you've got or assets, which might be like a special weapon that you've got if you were trying to make an attack or something like that. So, like I said, this is Cortex Prime, so it's like a toolkit. So it's telling you that if you're designing one, you will need to come up with sets of different types of attributes. Sets are like buckets of various traits that are like buckets the various traits are dropped into, dividing a character file into areas that are easily defined and assigned when making new characters. Traits sets are also the individual components of a dice pool. Most of the time when a player rolls to determine an outcome, they grab a die from each of the appropriate sets on the character file. The act of choosing a die from the set helps pull you back into the story and give some narrative structure to what might otherwise seem like just an elaborate dice game. Then we have, like, the fate points. So this game was also trying to, I think, give more structure to Fate. I mean, it's very structured similarly to Fate, but it's using more dice and it's trying to give more structure in a more gamist way. Sounds like the best way to keep track would be to keep dice on your character sheet for each trait so that you can grab the dice for each that apply. Yes, it could be. So we do have, like, unlike fate points, we've got the plot points that are meta currency. They can be generated randomly. Like we saw, if you roll a 1 on one of your dice, then you get a plot point. If you rely too heavily on plot points, though, being generated by utterly random occurrences, such as rolling hitches, players may feel their character's progress is arbitrary and out of their control. Always include some way the player can make a risky or challenging choice to gain plot points in the process. And that's what I do like about compels in Fate and hostile invocations, because that's a way to get fate points that is not random and arbitrary. So in Cortex Prime, you may roll a lot of dice, but you don't add all of them together. By default, players keep 2 dice and add them together for their total. Now, it doesn't actually, as we're going to find out later, it doesn't actually always have to be the 2 highest dice. You don't have to get the 2 highest dice. There may be reasons why you don't want the highest die, the 2 highest dice. And actually, that's also a weird thing about it to me with the rolling for the difficulty, like the wall over there. Let's say the game master might be rolling multiple dice for that wall. More than 2. You got to pick 2 dice. But for different reasons, that wall can have a difficulty pool of more than 3 dice. But the game master does not have to choose the 2 highest dice to add together. If the game master wants the difficulty of that task to be lower, the game master can choose 2 lower dice. And I believe it's the case that all dice are rolled out in the open in this game. So that if the game master wants to make it easier, the game master could choose lower dice. Why not just let the game master choose an arbitrary DC that represents what they want at that time? I do wonder about that mechanic. I've never played it, but that's a lot of dice rolling to maybe allow the game master to have control of what the world is like and maybe not. But that's the way this goes. So The statistical qualities of rolling a bunch of dice of varying sizes is a little beyond this primer, but if you're worried about the odds, take some comfort in the fact that it operates on a curve. This seems obvious when choosing dice that a D12 is better than a D4. That 5 dice should logically result in better average than 2, especially if you keep the 2 highest rolling dice in any given roll. Stepping up and stepping down. If you're told to step up a die, go up 1 step larger. If you have to step it down, go 1 step lower. Assets and complications. Another central part of Cortex Prime is the use of assets and complications. This includes such things as stress or resources or stunts, basically temporary traits that either help you out or make life more difficult for you. An asset is a trait you create during play that instantly labels a part of the fiction as significant. Sure, there are guns everywhere in an action movie setting, but when it's a gun die 8, people take notice. When you create them by spending plot points or as the result of a die roll, an asset allows you to improve your character, your chance, by influencing the story by adding more dice in a flavorful and thematic way. By contrast, complications are traits that make things harder for you. As Cortex Prime is almost always a game of opposed dice rolls, increasing the risk of something makes the opposition better by increasing their dice pool. So if there's something wrong with you, like you are complication or stress, or whatever they end up being called in your game, because this is the general version of it. But let's say it's a wound. Say that you have been hurt and you have taken, your wound will actually be a die rating that was done against you. You may have a D8 wound, slash across the chest, D8. Okay, well, the D8 doesn't actually hurt you because you're always adding 2 dice, like directly by what you're rolling. What happens is if that complication is relevant to that roll, then the opposition rolls it, which is going to make the opposition's roll higher. So if you've got D8 and it seems like the D8 if you've got a D8 wound and that wound would be influential in this particular contest, then the opposition gets to add your wound die, that D8, to their roll, which may make their roll higher. See? There's no subtraction. The killer feature of Cortex is there's a reason to use your lowest rated traits. Yes. And, you're talking about, I think we will get to that. But you don't always use your highest traits. I like the at-a-glance symbol notation. So complications are bonus dice included in your opposition's dice pool. That's what I was just saying. When your negative circumstances would hinder you. So if you like rolling dice, this might be a game for you. If you like dice pools and rolling a lot of dice, you like after opposition. This may be, if you like this kind of family of games, this may be the game for you. So a healthy game of Cortex Prime often ends up with the player area or character files and chat windows covered with sticky notes or index cards. So you've got sticky notes and index cards, like in Index Card RPG and also in Fate, each labeled with some asset or complication or equivalent. They come and go, they change hands, they get bigger or reduced in size, and they're assigned the story is evolving and changing, directly affected by the players and their choices. So how to use this. So let's see. This book, like I said, is the. In fact, it might actually be better since this is the toolkit. It might actually be better to take a look at an instantiation of this as Zadia. We might do that today, or we might just do that later on a different chat. But the dice pool. Let's see. Hitches and botches, rolling dice. So you assemble your pool based on your different sets of attributes that apply. The GM assembles the opposition pool for the contest. Oh, the effect die. Okay. Usually when this is important. So we basically got the other part of this. Usually when you roll 2 or more dice, you choose 2 results and add them together for your total. It doesn't have to be the 2 largest die. So when you are rolling 2 or more dice, you choose 2 results and add them together for your total. And a third die is used as the effect die. If you're rolling one die, your total is equal to the result of that die. If you don't have a third die, your effect die starts at the D4, the smallest. See effect die on page D20 for more how effect dice work, because this is also an important part of this. All rolls, including the GM's, are done in the open. Yes, okay, I thought I remembered that. After rolling dice, leave them on the table in view of everyone. Only pick up the dice once the test or contest has been resolved. We differentiate the dice results in the color of the outline, interior, and numbers. So, for instance, if you're rolling 2 D6s and that's all you have in your pool, then you have a total of 8. And if you need to determine an effect die, its effect die is a D4, the lowest, because you don't have one. Here in this case, the dice pool that was assembled is a D4, a D6, a D8, a D10, and a D12. So the player got to roll all of those. So the player rolled one botch. That's one. That one has to be ignored. Black interiors, the red outlines, and white number, or hitches, excuse me. Rolled one hitch over here. The 2 is not being used. The 6 and the 11, the player chose to make their total a 17 to try to accomplish the task. And then the effect die uses the green, or the D10 indicated here in green, as the effect die. If you use a die as an effect die, it does not matter what that effect die rolled. It's only the size of the die that matters. So choosing to use the D10 as an effect die, because we needed whatever to get over our opposition. In order to accomplish the task, you got to have a high total. But then when you decide, okay, it was accomplished, okay, what degree of success did you have? You got to go to your effect die. That's a reason why you might not want to include your highest die in your total, because it might be a really high type of die that you want to use as an effect die. So over here, we're using 6 and 7, a D6 and a D8 to get a total of 13. But then we have to determine the effect. We're going to use a D12. Does that make sense? You are free to choose any 2 dice for your total. You don't need to choose the 2 highest rolling dice. You may want to save a die with more sides for your effect die, even if it was the highest result. Likewise, the GM may decide to let the dice fall where they may and always keep the 2 highest rolling dice, or may use the choice of 2 dice as a way to moderate the opposition without simply fudging dice. It's being done in the open. Well, it was a complicated task, so it was 2d6 or whatever, or and then there were all these other dice, but we're choosing lower ones here. So Game Master's option, without having to fudge dice rolls. You and the other players make decisions for the group in response to the challenging situations the GM presents. Not every situation needs to involve the dice. Don't bother picking up the dice unless the outcome of a roll, success or failure, would be interesting or move the story along. So hitches and botches. If you roll a hitch, a 1, that's a hitch on the die. It doesn't count toward your total at all and cannot be used as your effect die. It's called a hitch because it's a little obstacle that could lead to an inconvenience, a complication, without ensuring failure. Set hitches aside for now. The Game Master has the option to activate those hitches to do things on their side of the table. The Game Master may also roll hitches called opportunities, which the player can activate. If the Game Master rolls a hitch, it's called an opportunity, and the player has a chance. If all of your dice come up as 1, that's a botch, and it is a sure sign of trouble, especially since your total is effectively 0. With a typical failed test or contest, not everything is bad. The story still moves forward, but not how the characters might like. With a botch, there's no ambiguity about it. Those things are bad for that character, and sometimes their story hits a brick wall for the moment. Game mechanics that allow you to re-roll dice can be used to re-roll hitches or even a whole botch, so long as they haven't been used to trigger any other game effect. The Game Master should ask the players if they have such a mechanic in play before spending the hitches for complications or other effects. We also, like we have stunts in Fate, we also have special effects, which are like your special abilities here. They can alter the influence or alter influence dice pools, dice results, other things. So that's very common in this family of games again. So let's find out about this effect die. Okay, an effect die. In a test, if you beat the difficulty by 5 or more in a roll, you've got a heroic success. You not only get what you want, but your roll produces an unexpected beneficial result. In a contest, if your opponent loses by 5 or more, you've got a heroic success and you are the clear victor. As with any success, the GM may ask you to describe your amazing effort, but that's just icing on the cake. There's an added benefit as well. The effect die, see the following example, is stepped up by 1 for every 5 points you beat the difficulty by. So there's a mechanical thing here. It's not saying, okay, come up with something extra. It's that you actually step up your effect die. So there's a mechanical effect here. So the effect die is chosen from the dice pool after the dice are used for the total are taken out and added together. The effect die is used for things like determining the size of an asset or complication if you're using the mod stress. Only the size of the effect die, the number of size matters. The result rolled on the effect die has no further use in the roll. You won't always need an effect die, especially when you're only concerned with pass-fail outcomes. But if you need a degree of success, that's how this is handling degree of success. Pass-fail, that's just your number you've rolled together. If you need degree of success, that's when you go to your effect die. So T's Sage is trying to come up with a new security monitoring system for an enemy base. Mary Rose has set up a difficulty of 12. T rolls a pool of 5 dice, D12, D8, D8, D6, and D4. The D8s come up with 8, which is added together for a total of 16, beating the difficulty. The D12 comes up 2, so T chooses the D12 as the effect die. This means the Sage's security system, an asset, is rated at 12. So she's creating the security system, and her effect is now 12. Had T rolled an 8 on the D12 and a 2 on one of the 8s instead, they'd chosen a 8 effect die. The security system would not have been as strong. In either case, the fact the die didn't roll a 2 doesn't matter. Only the number of sides matter. Or, like I said, if you're trying to wound somebody in an attack and you are able to successfully attack them and you cause a wound, well, what kind of wound do you inflict? Or what kind of damage do you inflict? You inflict the damage, the effect die upon them, which is going to make it easier for you to continue to affect them later. What are you thinking about this? I had never seen anything like this. But it fits this family. It has Fate-like elements that I like. It tries to give Fate more structure, because that's why people recommended both Savage Worlds and this to me. Is okay, if you like the Fate idea, but you're trying to get more structure, then this may be it. Being taken out. This is also very Fate-like. Most tests and contests don't carry the risk of failure so dire that it can take a PC out of a scene. It's up to the GM to make it clear from the beginning when it's a high-stakes scene where failure may be seen as being taken out. Some examples include staying awake for knockout gas, initiates a contest for another PC they want to knock out unconscious. Being taken out by complications. So how do you know if you were taken out due to like wounds, for instance? If a complication attached to a character is somehow stepped up beyond a 12, that character is automatically taken out of a scene. Remember, you can step up dice. So if you've got a D12 wound and you're supposed to step up that wound, then you would be taken out because that's above a 12. Complications that are stepped up beyond 12 are such a significant hindrance that they effectively keep the character from being able to act or play a part in the scene. James says, I really like using the side count of the dice. It's a static, reliable number, and it's unique, in my personal experience, way to influence results. I have not seen anything like this either. Because originally I was like, why wouldn't you always choose the biggest two, the highest rolling dice? Oh, it's because you may want to use the die roll or the actual die as your effect. Seems to make sense. Let's go over to an instantiation of this. I forget what a hero die is. But also in this, in the last few minutes, let's look at the Dragon Prince instantiation. because this is the toolkit. And it's got some worlds in here as examples of worlds that have been built. But then we also have, well, now here we go. Well, my computer's being slow. But also a very GURPS-like kind of back in here that will tell you a bunch of different traits and how to adjudicate them in the game, like, you know, a plasma blast or something like that. So that could be, you know, whatever. It could be some kind of magical thing. It could be a weapon you've got. But there's a very GURPS-like element here to the back, if my computer would load this. Oh, here. That describes how to actually set up your game, how to set up your traits, how to construct a character, how to construct a character sci-fi. So this system is doing what I wished GURPS had done, right? Or was trying to. Here we got another attempt where it's trying to do this, but because it's been bouncing around between different companies, it really hasn't. Here's your core toolkit that's going to tell you how to create a game. And then, yes, look, somebody who cares takes that toolkit and creates it instantiates all of that into a particular world, trying to invoke the feel of the world. So they were trying to do that. But they have not been able to do it for another reason. Tails, Dragon. Let's see. Anybody else watch The Dragon Prince? I hear there's going to be another. I think I have this in digital form. Okay, well, here's the rules primer. Hey, that's fine. This is perfect. So what's an instantiation of this world? So this is the Dragon Prince Tales of Zadia rules primer that uses the Cortex rule system. So what does this look like? This is our basic, okay, dice pool examples right here, dice results, total. Stepping up and stepping down, hitches and botches, plot points. Character journal, your character. Okay, so here is the example of Rayla from the Dragon Prince. So our sets here are values. This is as of the end of book 1, Moon. So devotion, love and devotion compel and define me. Glory, if those I care about know me, that's all the legacy I want. And this is describing whether or not this is true about you, right? So, and if it's not true about you, then it's a D4. If it's very true about you, then it might be a D12. So justice, so she's only a D4 on glory, so she's not glory motivated. Liberty, my real allegiance is to my heart and those who know it. That's a D8. But devotion, love and devotion compel and define me. That's a D10. Truth is a D6. Justice is a D8. And then her stats over here. So this is another set of traits: agility, awareness, influence, intellect, spirit, and strength. She is also a moon shadow elf. So this is our values, her stats, and then she has distinctions as well. So the distinctions include the following: moon shadow elf, which is rated as a D8. So if being a moon shadow elf would help you in a certain situation, then you can add that moon shadow elf die to the dice pool. As a moon shadow elf, Rayla draws power from the moon as it is strongest at night, especially on the full night of the full moon. On the night of the full moon, her heritage provides her with greater natural agility and speed than other elves. James says, I have Dragon Prince in my Amazon cart. I'll pick it up at some point, but Blades in the Dark won this week. I need it for personal research on progress clocks, and it's been recommended a lot here. It has been recommended a lot here, and I need to look at it for progress clocks as well. So this gives you some Dragon Prince primer, but we do need to look at especially the clocks and things like that, because I want time to be such an important part of an RPG. So for instance, Elven Grace, so Moonshadow Elf will allow you to spend a power point or plot point to step up your agility die. So the agility die is naturally D10, and a test, contest, or challenge, but you could step that up to a 12 by spending a plot point. for things that factor in your elven speed and balance. Moon shadow form. When trying to hide, sneak, or go unseen during a full moon, spend a plot point to double your moon shadow elf distinction die and keep a extra die in your total. So if these apply, you add them to your roll. Reluctant assassin. Hinder. Gain 1 power point when you switch out this distinction's die rating for D4. So you can step down, you swap that down and get yourself a power point. Like, well, I'm giving up some of my assassin stuff to get a new plot point for the rest of the session or whatever. Specialties. Sneaking, used for getting around without being noticed. She also has specialties over here. So these categories, distinctions, specialties, values, attributes, those were designed for this particular game out of Cortex. Sword play is a D6, used when doing battle armed with swords, knives, and other bladed weapons, tracking D6. And then she also has an asset, which is Elven Butterfly Blades, which are a D8 asset. Rayla's twin weapons are both deadly and versatile, capable of transforming between lethal blades and curved hooks. While a sharp blade is always useful in a fight, a surprise hook to the legs can catch an opponent off guard. So that's what a character sheet looks like, and you're basically trying to build out your pool based on whatever matters. And I tried to take inspiration from this in Fated Edge, because I do like this approach better than the Fate approach. Because as we had said, one of the issues that people had with Fate, or we always had with Fate, when it seemed like is that every single aspect in Fate, now, well, actually, that's not quite true, because you can do free invokes. Most of the time, with the exception of free invocations of aspects, if you want an aspect to matter, when you're rolling dice in Fate, you have to play a Fate point. And if you're out of Fate points, then that aspect won't matter. And that seems weird in a lot of situations to a lot of people, including me. And the example that we always use is on fire. If the opponent has the aspect on fire, if you make the person on fire, then you would get a free invocation of being on fire. So I'm going to attack them. And it's going to be harder for them to defend because they are also on fire. On fire isn't doing anything to them turn to turn. You get a free invocation of on fire, which will give you a +2 to your roll. If you want to invoke on fire again, you're going to have to use a fate point. And then when you're out of fate points, on fire doesn't do anything else. And that's weird. So Cortex did solve this problem. And I like that. Cortex solved this problem by not requiring you to use, they've got their meta currency, but they're not requiring you to use that meta currency in order to, let's say, invoke different aspects, which are called traits in this game, that would apply in a particular context. That allows them to do that in a rather elegant way. So if it's, we always have to pull from values and attributes in every contest. So in a particular contest of fighting, maybe it's devotion because she's fighting, like trying to defend a fallen foe. So in this particular instance, I'm fighting to defend a fallen foe who would otherwise be killed, and love and devotion compelled him to find me. So I'm going to be really good at defending this guy. So I'm going to pull in a D10 here. And then I'm going to pull in a strength D8 because I'm going to be fighting with my, or I'm going to fight with my agility. So that's another D10. So I'm thinking I'm going to be good at this. Sword play, I'm fighting with my knives and blades. So I'm going to pull in another D6. And then I'm using my Elven Butterfly blades specifically, which are a D8. So my dice pool, then all of a sudden my sword play matters. My assets matter. And if the guy were on fire, then the guy would have a complication die that is so large that makes them on fire. And I won't have to use a PowerPoint. I would just incorporate the other guy's on fire die into my attack against him. Because the complication dice don't subtract from somebody's roll. It's all addition. So it's actually adding to the die pool of the other person, right? So then the fact that that person is on fire would also apply here and would continue to apply so long as they're on fire. That makes so much sense to me. So I tried to do something similar in Fated Edge. We were talking about adding bonus and penalty dice. I wasn't requiring the equivalent of a fate point to incorporate some kind of bonus as a result of some kind of condition out there. I think that's better. I think that's something that this and what I'm trying to do has going for it. Hey, Neutromancer. Neutromancer says aspects matter even if it doesn't change the number in a roll. The example on fire is always super casually used because it's a valid example of giving someone an aspect. Aspects always matter even if it doesn't change the number in a roll. The example on fire is always super casually being used as a valid example. I do use it as an example a lot because it came up in my games too, so it's used as a valid example of giving someone an aspect. But what you don't have is you don't have, like, if you're in D&D, what people are expecting, like if there's somebody's on fire, then in D&D where they're losing like 1d6 hit points, right, around or something like that, because that's a constant thing that's on them. Well, that's not an inherent part of fate. That becomes an aspect that becomes invocable. Yes, from the narrative standpoint, they're still on fire. You can be doing whatever things like that. But when you're asking, hey, no, wait, they're on fire, don't they take more damage? Not inherently. Hey, Micah. What if the aspect is ripped his head off? Why doesn't it matter? Seems to be the kind of thing people complain about. Let me see if I understand. What if the aspect is ripped his head off? Why doesn't it matter? Seems to be the kind of thing people complain about. I'm not exactly. I don't exactly take that meaning, Neutromancer. The example on fire is normally an aspect put in the room and not on people that are up and about. Well, okay, but what happens when it is put on somebody? Okay, the point is setting someone on fire might be vetoed by the GM as it's not something so casual. It's just create an advantage. It's not something so casual. It's just to create advantage. Well, okay, so then maybe we made a wrong call. Maybe that's not something that so you can't, if you try to put somebody on fire, you try to douse them with, you hit them with Greek fire, you put them on, or you try to hit them with oil or something like that. It could be the case that the game master should just veto that. Okay, you can't do that. You can turn the room on fire, but you can't put, so maybe that's the call. But other people won't like that, right? If setting people on fire is something always happens in your game, you need to come up with another thing than aspect. So that's, so you could end up saying, well, this is a toolkit. We need to come up with some other way to handle it. But that still is a problem of fate, because we came up with lots of situations where, okay, wait a minute, fate doesn't give me guidance on how to resolve the situation. We talked about shooting him in the leg. I remembered more about the shoot him in a leg example. We tried this person wants to shoot them in the leg. And I believe the issue was that, so is that making an attack or is it creating an advantage? Which became unclear. So the argument for saying, well, it's an attack, if you're trying to do something that could potentially take somebody out or injure them, that seems like some kind of consequence you would have. You would shoot them in the leg, and that would be making an attack against them. But the character that is being influenced is the one who decides what their consequences are. I believe I remember that correctly. I think that ended up being an issue here. That if you're trying to create an advantage, then you're the one who gets to say what the advantage is. So we're saying, hey, okay, so Neutromancer says leg wound is a consequence, a result of not doing enough stress. So that means that you can't. So from my understanding of that is that you cannot say, I want to shoot this guy in the leg. Like it was a sniper, and the character was a sniper, and there was a guy down there, and the objective was to shoot that guy in the leg. You shot somebody in the leg. The victim uses stress to not be shot in the leg. Yeah. But see, I believe it's the case that that victim would get to decide what their consequence is. So if they don't want to be shot in the leg, if they take 3 points of stress beyond their stress level, if they're beyond their stress levels, so they're actually in consequence, a 3-point consequence, they could choose for it to be arm, or they could choose it to be something else. So it's difficult for, you can't make a called shot, if my understanding is correct, and say, I want to shoot that guy in the leg, because the other guy can say whether or not he was shot in the leg or if something else happened to him. So that was a weird part. It was a weird part. Neutromancer says, that's another thing. Not everything is a conflict. A sniper shooting someone in the leg is usually just a random NPC as an obstacle. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but I mean, that still seems like a reasonable thing for a PC to request, especially if it's somebody like, hey, we got to go maybe it's not a random NPC. Maybe it's somebody that you're deliberately trying to capture. And you're like, all right, I tell you what, we're just going to try to deliberately shoot them in the leg and then send some other ones in. Anon says both Cortex and Fate have multiple different ways of doing exactly the same thing, which is only different in the metagame. That's why I think they're fantastic to study together, because it's this family of games. It's games like Savage Worlds, Fate, Cortex, and even GURPS that I'm putting in a kind of family here. So this is so your attributes, your values, your distinctions, we basically saw those on her. That these are the different sets and groups, specialties and as assets. So stress. Okay, so let's look at stress then, because we were just talking about consequences. And PH says, I defend every wound having a consequence. Neutral Master says, if it's a conflict, it means both sides can hurt each other. You can shoot them anywhere you want. And if you succeed, you deal a consequence. So am I wrong about that? That the player who injures you determines your consequence? Gordon says Cipher System is another generic rule set that's been applied to many genres and settings. And we did look at Cipher System. We did take a look at Cipher System on the Morning Grind. Characters in Tales of Zadia must often endure great hardship. So this is how it's handling, basically, consequences and stress. So here we go. Characters in Zadia. So this is, again, built off of the Cortex system. Characters in Tales of Zadia must often endure great hardship or suffer through perilous situations in order to triumph. We represent these personal obstacles with stress dice, which are ranged from D6 to D12. Your PC acquires stress dice during play. Track your stress dice on your character journal. Stress dice are added to your opposition's pool whenever it might make things harder for you, so they're like the opposite of assets. You can recover stress dice aside from corrupted stress, an exception discussed during playing a dark mage, when your character has time to rest, recuperate, or gain the benefits of medicine. And this is stress, so it could be all different kinds of stress, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be just be physical wounds, which is nice because this is also giving you a system for things like mental and social stress and being taken out. Fate has the mental and social tracks, the mental and physical tracks, which I like. This is also giving a more general sense of stress that could cause you to be taken out. So you can recover stress dice when your character has time to rest, recuperate, or gain the benefits of medicine. By spending a plot point, you can also step down one of your stress dice when the narrator rolls an opportunity. So that was when the narrator rolls a 1. So when they roll a 1, you can spend this plot point to step down. This represents shaking it off, taking a breath, or realizing that it wasn't as bad as you thought. Stress dice that are stepped down to D4 are removed from your character journal. So that's why it says D6. If it goes down to D4, you remove it. So types of stress. I really like this. Types of stress. This actually is more comprehensive than what Fate is. And I like this. Now, this is the types of stress that have been built for this particular world. So stress dice come in 6 different types. Your character might be affected by more than one type of stress, but only one stress die can be added to your opposition at any given roll. So it's whatever stress would be the most consequential to that particular roll. Again, I like that. When we're looking at attributes, or when we're looking at abilities, we're saying which one of these abilities is the most critical for the possible point of failure on doing this action. Likewise, if we're looking at what stress applies, we're looking at what particular type of stress is most likely to cause this action to be unsuccessful. So stress comes in 6 different types of dice. Your character might be affected by one or more types of stress, but only one stress die can be added to your opposition in any given roll. If you take more stress of a given type, it simply steps up the die rather than adding another die of the same type. So, for instance, if you take more stress of a given type, if you already have D6 of injured and you're injured again, then it steps up to D8. And I think it might be the case that, like, if you've got D6 injured and the effect die is a D4 injured, it might not affect you. You might not have had enough effect because you're already D6 injured. You would need to be at least D8 injured. That's why the size of the effect die matters. When your stress die reaches D12 and will be stepped up again, you are stressed out, which means you're going to be taken out of that scene. You're stressed out. This is a game about stress here. Hey, Trey. Hey, sorry I'm late. Wife and I ran a one-on-one with the system and really liked it a lot. Our only issue was that other than Dragon Prince, there was not much made for it. Great game if you're already building your own world. We were just talking about that. We were talking about that Cortex was supposed to be like what I wanted GURPS to be, in the sense that, okay, you've got your core toolkit, and then somebody actually makes a series of takes that toolkit for you in advance and creates a world book like they did with Dragon Prince, but it just hasn't happened. Okay, we can talk about that later. There'll be a lot more Fate to discuss. Because I think you're right that it does not if you try, Fate is at its worst when you try to run it like D&D, for instance. But that means that there's a lot of things that I found that the players wanted to do that they didn't really like. So we ended up going with other systems, even though I think a well-run game of Fate is extremely enjoyable, and Lou can do that very well. So our stresses, which again I like, you're here are your different stress tracks. So it's more than just mental and physical. Afraid. This is the stress of fear and panic. Once this exceeds 12, you are gripped in the clutches of terror. Angry. This is the stress of rage and frustration. Once this exceeds 12, you are lost in your wrath. Corrupted. This is the stress of dark magic. Once this exceeds D12, you are consumed with darkness. Exhausted. This is the stress of fatigue and weariness. Once this exceeds D12, you may no longer remain awake. You can no longer remain awake. Injured. This is the stress of pain and wounding. Once this exceeds D12, you collapse unconscious and may die. Insecure. This is the stress of apprehension and worry. Once this exceeds D12, you succumb to insecurity. I like that. I think that sounds pretty cool. Micah says, I'll say this, the layout and clarity of Cortex Prime for explaining and using graphics for someone who hasn't played any TTRPG before seemed to me to be great for newbies to the hobby. Oh, really? That's good to know. We like good layouts and stuff around here. So magic, and specifically how to play a mage. Anytime you're called to roll for a test, contest, or challenge, you assemble a dice pool out of the following traits. One attribute die. So you can't, if more than one attribute matters, you can't do that. One value die. One distinction die. So you've got to choose what distinction would be most important. So you can't, once you've chosen a distinction, that's it. One specialty die. So I think, so is this always, you always roll 3 in this game? You might always roll 3 in this particular version. One attribute die, one value die, one distinction die, one specialty die if applicable, one or more asset dice if applicable, one of your opponent's stress dice if applicable, extra die from special effects if applicable. So that's how you're trying to assemble the pool. So it should be 3 dice, one from attribute, value, and distinction at all times. If a specialty applies, use it. If an asset die, if one or more assets apply, use it. And then if your opponent has stress, use it, plus your special abilities. Heroic success steps up your effect die is stepped up for every 5 points you beat the difficulty by. Mechanical. I like it. Effect die. We've talked about that. Ineligible dice. Effect dice in opposition. When rolling dice for tests, the effect die can give you an idea of how well you did on the test. A D12 effect die means that the test had a mind-blowing outcome, while D4 means it was barely successful. If you failed the test, the narrator might give you a stress die equal to the opposition's effect die. But if you succeed, the opposition's effect die doesn't matter. That's in a specific thing called a contest. There were several different types of dice roll contests, oppositions, kind of things. And some of them, when I was reading through either the main book over here or Cortex Prime, I didn't completely understand. If you win the dice roll in a challenge, the effect die lets you know if you can reduce the challenge pool by a whole die or just step one. So that's the challenge pool if you're trying to accomplish something that's like basically a long task. Plot points. Similar to Fate, you can earn plot points, okay, when the hitches were said, but giving in. If you're during a contest and you let your opponent succeed, rather than rolling the dice to beat their total, you earn a plot point. You only get this plot point if you've already rolled at least once in the contest. You don't get a plot point if someone starts the contest and you choose not to oppose it. When to spend plot points. See, okay, this was at tests, contests, and challenges. These are the 3 different times, different times you roll dice and what they mean. A test is when you roll dice to resolve a situation by determining if there's a successful outcome or a challenging failure. Examples might include climbing a wall, escaping a guard, or solving a riddle. Almost always, tests are initiated by the narrator asking the player, "What do you do?" When the PC gets into a conflict over something they want, this is called a contest, which determines if any other character can intervene, thwart, or oppose your character. Examples include fighting a duel with a foe, arm wrestling a friend, or baking the best pie. Contests are almost always initiated by a player who picks up the dice and essentially says, "I'm doing this, who's stopping me?" Whereas a challenge is when the narrator describes a situation that might take more than one single test to resolve, often one that's time-sensitive or carries on an ongoing risk. Examples include fighting back an army, disarming a complex magical trap, or convincing a room full of nobles to do things your way. Challenges start with questions like, "Can I do this before time runs out?" or "How long is this going to take?" And then there are different rules for each one of those different things. So the test is most straightforward. The conflict is when you're engaging with somebody else. And then the challenge, I think it might have been adjudicating a challenge that I found the most complicated. Neutromancer says, "I won a free Cortex Prime watching them play Zadia on Twitch." Oh. Trey G says, "I always think of Cortex Prime as Fate with dice assigned stats. The room is just not on fire. It's the D10. It's D10 on fire, adding D10 to the difficulty." Yes, and I like that too. So yeah, the room is not just on fire, because on Fate it's just on fire. Okay. And then what do you do with that when you invoke it? Now the room is D10 on fire. So you also get levels of gradation. So that on fire comes with a die that's attached. Is it just D4 on fire, or is it D10 on fire? If it's D10 on fire, it's going to be a lot worse. And I do like that. I do like that. There's a lot to like in here. There's some things that trip me up. Like I can't remember exactly, but there's one of these that's kind of was difficult for me to understand. And I also think that always having to roll opposition is slow. But there's a lot to like in here. There's a lot to like in here, I think. I wanted to look at, I liked the rules for healing yourself. And I realize I'm going a little bit long, but I wanted to find that and show that to you. Well, okay, here's an example of a challenge. Let me see here. Outcomes, interfering with others. So we can see exactly how it's played. Stress, stressed out, pushing stress dice. Yeah, okay, I want to look at this because the stress and stuff is recovering. How do we recover? Running the game, dramatic order. Okay, yeah, here. Let's give an example of this challenge right here. Challenge, get past the giant spiders. So this is, okay, so this is specifically a challenge. No, this is a contest. Okay, so this is a contest. This is an example test. So see, the challenge was the most complicated. You can see it's most complicated because that's the longest. So there's some kind of challenge here. Let's just look at, isn't there just a fighting thing right here? Sneaking past. Let's just go to the stress. Hey, Sable. Neutromaster says, much older versions of Fate had stats in the aspects. That got removed after 2.0. Neutromaster says, the thing is that something like a conflict in Fate ideally is done with 2 or 3 exchanges. The back and forth makes each roll more meaningful than you get damaged for 7 HP. So you invest some time now, but avoid dragging the combat on and on. I've looked at both. We were looking at Cortex Prime in the beginning, and now we came to look at a particular instantiation of Cortex, which is Dragon Prince. So we started by looking at the general system and are now looking at application of the system. Let's just go down. Okay, so stress. Okay, so your character takes stress when they fail a test, challenge, or contest. The size of the stress die is equal to the effect die of the opposing pool with a minimum of D6. So when your stress is your opponent's effect die. Whoever inflicted the stress die on you gets to choose what type of stress it is based on the nature of the test, contest, or challenge. So here, it is explicit that the person who inflicts it on you says that what type of stress it is. And we've got a variety of different kinds of stress that they can actually give you. And I also like that. So just because you're in a sword fight doesn't mean that you can't inflict fear on them, for instance, right? The narrator can also step up one of your existing stress dice when you roll a hitch and they activate it. If they don't have any stress dice, the narrator can inflict one on you at D6. How effect dice create stress starting from none. So the effect die is 4. So the effect die is 4. You are injured. D6, you are injured. D10, you are D10 injured. If all of your dice come up as hitches, that's a botch. The narrator can inflict D6 stress of any type on your character and set it up for 1 of every hitch on the roll past the first. And step it up by every hitch on the roll past the first. If this ends up being more than a D12 stress, for instance, you rolled 5 hitches, which is D6 stepped up 4 times, or it steps up existing stress past 12, your character is stressed out. You do not get PowerPoint for a botch. Okay, recovering stress. And actually, this may be a more sophisticated section in the main book. This is just the primer. During any scene in which your character spends most of the time sleeping, eating, or resting, or otherwise taking care of themselves, all of your stress dice, except for corrupted stress, step down by 1 die. At the end of every session, all of your stress dice also step down by 1 unless the narrator decides there's some reason for stress to persist, such as a cliffhanger ending. You can also recover stress dice in other ways, usually by seeking out somebody or something to help them down more. If you're stressed out, I think that's when it gets more difficult. Activating one of the narrator's hitches allows you to step down a stress die by 1. Other characters can attempt to recover your stress by making a test against an opposition pool based on the difficulty die equal in size to the stress die being recovered. If they succeed, compare their effect die to your stress die. So your friends in this game have to help you out to recover from stress, which is thematic for Dragon Prince. If it's larger, your stress goes away. If it's equal to or less, your stress steps down by 1. Stress can't go lower than D6. If it's stepped down from D6, it's eliminated. If any of your die is ever stressed up past 12, your character is stressed out and no longer partakes of the scene they're in. Once the scene is over and your character is somewhere where they can recover or rest or recover, the stress die goes away entirely and is replaced by a trauma die. Okay. We got stress and trauma in this game. You can be stressed out, you got stress, you got trauma. This is the Dragon Prince, yes. Yeah, as far as I've seen, each different IP done with Cortex changes a bunch of things to the core. Let's see. I see. That's what when I saw season 1, I really enjoyed season 1. Let's see. Stressed out. So the trauma die. We got stress and trauma. Let's go ahead and finish this. So afraid. We hit D12 and afraid, and we got stressed out. So the character was taken out of the scene. So that means that we are going to now get trauma, D6 afraid. It's possible that you don't get to safety or a place of healing soon enough, in which case the narrator might say that your character has been lost, died, or suffered some other terrible fate. So if you are taken out, you have got to be someplace where you can rest and recover. If you do that, the stress die goes away entirely and is replaced with a trauma die. It's possible that if you don't get to safety or a place of healing soon enough, in which the case the narrator might say that your character has been lost, died, or suffered some other terrible fate. Taking a character permanently out of the game should be a conversation between the player and the narrator. That's more the narrative story arc of this. This doesn't happen often, but if it does, there should be some dramatic send-off to your character. Tears are shed, friends swear vengeance, and songs are sung. Next session, you can start with a new character and start a new journey. So, pushing stress dice. You can. I like this. I like this too. So again, there's stuff to like in here. There's so much stuff to like. You can choose to have your character shoulder through their pain and suffering and use it as a motivator rather than a setback. To do this, spend a PowerPoint and add your stress die to your own dice pool for that test, contest, or challenge rather than adding it to the opposing pool. So that's your meta currency. Using stress dice in this fashion has an additional cost, however. After the stress, contest, or challenge is resolved, the stress dice you include in your dice pool is stepped up by 1. This result may result in your PC being stressed out if the die is stepped up past 12. Wouldn't that be a cool way to resolve or, to go out in a scene if you did it that allows you to accomplish what made the scene successful? That's pretty cool, I think. But you've got to pay your meta currency to do that. Last-ditch efforts. In some cases, you may be able to temporarily recover enough stress during a scene that you have been stressed out, in some cases, you may be able to temporarily recover enough stress during a scene after you've been stressed out, which is something we call last-ditch effort. This must be prompted by someone trying to rouse you, snap you out of it, clear your head, or inspire you with words. So again, it's something else somebody has to do for you, which is thematic for Dragon Prince. The character trying to help you makes a test similar to a recovery test. 2d8 difficulty plus the d12 stress that you still have. Take note of their effect die. You may get to use it as an asset on your roll. If they're successful, you can attempt something in the current scene so long as it's a short or intermediate sort of activity. This might be taking a turn in a challenge or making a test. A contest is probably out of the question. The downside to this is that instead of adding 2 dice to get your total, you can only use 1. You can spend a PowerPoint to include more dice in your plot point, to include more in your total as normal. You may also add the effect dice to the test that was made to rouse you as an asset for the roll if that helps. After your moment of activity, you go back to being stressed out. So trauma is like long-term stress. Anytime a PC's stress is stepped up past 12, they're stressed out in the scene they're in, and they gain D6 trauma at the same type of stress that was just increased. Trauma functions like stress, but it's much harder to remove. During any scene in which your character is stressed out and has taken trauma, add additional stress of that same type to your character. During any scene in which your character is stressed out and has taken trauma, additional stress of the same type to your character goes directly to the trauma of that type. This won't happen often. You're already out of the scene after all, but it might occur under some circumstances. Once trauma is stepped up beyond 12, your character is permanently out of options. So that's how you actually die beyond not being able to get to help because you've been taken out. Once your trauma is stepped up beyond 12, your character is permanently out of options. They're dead, hopelessly incoherent, lost to their own psyche, or whatever seems appropriate. In the next scene, if the next scene is one in which your PC, so this could be like, if you're talking about Cthulhu, this could certainly be your madness or insanity, right? This is what's sticking with you. If your next scene is one in which your PCs can be taken care of or allowed to recuperate, your character's stress is reduced to 0, but the trauma remains at the level it was at the end of the previous scene. Recovering trauma requires somebody else to make the tests to help you. You can't help yourself. You've got to have somebody else get you out of your trauma. This works like recovering stress, but the effect die isn't used. If the player beats the difficulty, the trauma is stepped down by 1. If the player fails to beat the difficulty, the trauma does not get any better or worse. The player can't try to recover the trauma again until time passes, although another friendly character might try to help. If a player rolls a hitch on a successful attempt to recover trauma, the narrator may hand over a plot point to inflict stress of a different type than the trauma that's already being recovered starting at 6. And so on. So I think there's a lot to like, so I'm glad we came back to this. I think this solves some of the problems that I have with Fate. Let's see what people are saying over here. Oh, lots of stuff going on. Right. Well, yes, this is the kind of stress right here. Right. Yeah, but this is good. So it gives you something else to do other than just hit points of damage. I like it. I like it. It makes me wonder, like, if you were doing a Lord of the Rings game, what type of different stress would you have? Palladium has a crazy stress system, has a crazy system for stress, mental issues, and disease. This die, if you like dice rolling, this is it. If you like rolling dice and dice pools, this is definitely it. This is basically Fate. When you're sad, you can't use all of your D&D dice at the same time. Yeah. Hello, everyone, Among the Damned says, and welcome as the channel member. Hello, everyone. I would make my character like me, energized and unstressed by violence, but if you call me she instead of he, I will sleep for a week. So it's showing a system of Fate where you can use dice to get the same idea. James says, I really think I like the system. It's probably a little slower due to the heavy dice rolling and dice selection, but I'm okay with that. Yeah, I've never gotten to actually play it, but that seems like the negative that I see as a result of especially having to roll the dice. Everything requires 2 sets of dice pool rolls. Everything does. I wonder how that actually works in play. I haven't ever gotten to try it, because you don't ever get to just have a static modifier. Now, maybe there's some option for that in Cortex Prime. Because like I said, there's a lot of other stuff in the Cortex Prime toolbox. But, Trey says it did not seem to go slow when we played. So I'm glad I refreshed my memory on this, because like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here that I like. That does seem to address the problem. I wish it were a more open system. But there's a lot of things in it that I like and that I would like to incorporate in a game of my own. All right. Well, all right. That was a long session today, but that's all right. I've got stuff I got to do. I got to do a lot more writing, and I'm actually going out today. Got dinner. Got to go out for dinner tonight. So I've got to get stuff done and then go out for dinner. Tomorrow night, we'll be doing Dark Knight. Brianna and Doug will be with us tomorrow night for Table Talk. We'll be analyzing The Dark Knight. Lou's not able to be back this Tuesday, but he is going to be coming back to explain his theory of storytelling later this month. He just can't do it tomorrow. So we're going to go ahead and do the analysis of The Dark Knight tomorrow with Brianna and Doug, and then we will go from there. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Be productive, be creative, and grind on.